Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. Got a fixed blade knife review coming your way. It's been a little while, but I haven't forgotten about them. So what we're going to look at today is the Ka-Bar BK7, otherwise called the Combat Utility Knife. And I've been using this knife for probably the past 2 years now, and so I've got a good amount of testing under my belt. I will be releasing just kind of a raw edit, testing video if you're curious just to see me using the knife. You won't see a lot of that in this video. But I really like the knife, and primarily I think most people just use this as, kind of just a survival knife, an outdoors blade. It could also be rolled into maybe more of the tactical use. It could definitely function in that role. That's not really kind of what I primarily see it as. And as a survival knife, it's kind of what I would term a mid-sized survival knife. It's a 7-inch blade, as the name implies, BK7. There is also a BK9, just a little bit larger version. I also like that knife. If you just like the little bit larger blades, like I do, I would maybe look at that one. So this is a mid-sized knife. It's a good size, and it's lightweight, easy to carry, still fairly capable. And so let's just start here on the front at the tip. Now the tip on here is really well designed. It's nice and sharp and pointy, and you could really stab something very easily with this, and it'd be very effective. But it's also relatively strong. I did a lot of batoning and beating on this tip, and it was very durable. And that kind of reinforced sharp tip really comes from the Bowie shape, Bowie blade shape that you see on here. It's a really good classic blade shape that's very effective, and I really like it. And it offers a good, long straight edge of knife that's just very functional, and then also offers some good belly in there, some good sweep in there. And so I really like that. You also have this unsharpened swedge here on the back. If you live in a state where that's legal and you're maybe using this more defensively, you could sharpen that swedge there on the back, and that would just add to the piercing capabilities. So the blade steel that they use on here is 1095 high carbon. That's a non-stainless steel, so you will have to worry about rust a little bit on here if you're using this in a really high humidity environment. If you're leaving this wet, and you're not leaving any oil or anything on it, it will potentially rust on you. Not a huge issue to me, because it is a steel that holds the edge easily, it's easy to resharpen, and it's very durable. It withstands shock and abuse very, very well. So I do like the steel choice. Just make sure you keep a little oil on it. Now, getting to the corrosion issue, they did put a fairly durable coating on here. Now this is just a little bit older version of the knife. The newer versions will have a few slight differences, what I really consider slight upgrades, and one of those differences is the coating. So you'll notice this is a little bit smoother coating. The newer one will be a little bit more of like a baked on, kind of like crinkle coat finish, much more similar to kind of what like the U.S.A knives include. And so this more kind of high texture baked on finish, and I really like those finishes. They're very, very durable. So you will get a little bit better finish in the future. Now, as far as the blade shape goes, you do have this this kind of flat grind going on here. You do have a little bit of spine left in the blade. It's not a full flat grind, and I do like this. It keeps some strength in the blade up here. It comes down to a fairly sharp edge. Now, the relief edge on here is not super super gradual. It's kind of abrupt, and you'll notice that doesn't really lend this to being the most razor sharp edge out of the box. And it is sharp. It holds the edge relatively well. What that more abrupt angle gives you is a much more durable edge. And so that really abrupt relief edge on there makes this thing more durable, and that is nice when you're batoning with this. And so it's not a huge criticism, but if you want to really make this just really shaving sharp, you would potentially want to consider maybe reprofiling this. Just a suggestion. And just talking a little bit about the blade, I do really consider this something that you would want to pair with some sort of survival saw. Something maybe like the Sawviver. There's several good designs out there, but I'd want to pair this with a saw. This is something that I'm mostly going to be doing my kind of firecraft, splitting wood and stuff with this, but for cross-cutting, you don't want to have to hack through everything with this. You're going to want a good saw to cross-cut. Now, if you want just kind of a one-tool wonder, maybe you need to go with more like a hatchet if you just want, something to just do everything with. But the saw and the survival knife combination I found is a really effective combination, and I really like it. So moving back on here just a little bit, you'll notice they did do a little bit of a thumb ramp on here and kind of a weak attempt at some jimping. It's not very sharp, it doesn't really provide much traction for you, but a little bit of a thumb ramp. And you also notice that the handle shape on here is very ergonomic. It's contoured, so your hand really fits in there. There's some ramps on the front and back, so your hand's not going to slide out of here. Other than that, though, other than the shape, there's not a ton of traction. These handles are just kind of a Zytel material. They're not very grippy. They don't really provide any traction. So I would potentially swap these out. And at the very least, I'd put a good lanyard on here. And this is just some paracord. I do like the brighter color paracord, just by the way, just because it's easier to find the knife. When this is laying on the ground in the leaves or something, a good red or orange or even a reflective cord really makes it easier to find the knife. So I would, at least have a lanyard on there. Now there are some good aftermarket grips that you can get for this. I believe there's some micarta grips out there. I think they're on $40 though, so a little bit on the pricey side. I know some people have made their own grips. You could try to just stipple these or something. So, there's stuff you could do to the grip. You could just wrap it in athletic tape. There's options. And one of the nice things is that it is held on there just with some screws. So if you want to, you can pop this off and do whatever you want. You could just do a paracord wrap. They really leave, the options open. Now, one of the downsides to those screws and to giving you those options is that those screws do have a tendency to kind of loosen up in use. And I haven't found that this knife gives you a ton of shock in the hands when you're batoning it or anything, but there's enough that it'll eventually loosen those screws up and your scales get kind of loose. So I would recommend when you get it, you pull the screws out, put some Loctite on there, and I've gone as far as even just keeping a little Allen wrench in the sheath with the knife, so that if they do loosen up, I can just crank them down again. And the other benefit to having the Allen wrench with you is that if you ever were in the wilderness and you wanted to make this into like a spear, maybe you were stranded and you thought maybe you could, spear some game with this, it is possible that you could pop these off and then use those holes to lash this to like a spear shaft or something. So that is a benefit. Now, as far as the shape, you'll notice the handles are contoured. They're very comfortable, and in using this for several hours at a time, I haven't really found any hot spots with it. It's a fairly comfortable handle, so I do like it. Now, moving back here on the end, you'll notice there is an exposed portion of the steel there, and so I really like that. If you want to pound on something, use that as an impact device, you can do that. And the other thing you'll notice about the construction of just this overall knife is that it's a fully exposed hang. It goes all the way back, and there's no real sharp edges or anything that's going to make this break. If you look at knives like the traditional USMC K-bar, lots of other knives out there where you have a tang that goes and tapers down inside the handle, those just aren't built for the kind of abuse that this can take. These more slab designs are really, really tough, and another kind of reference standard that I've used in the past is the SA6. This is another one of those slab design knives, and this thing is incredibly tough. So I really, for the hard use wilderness knives, I really lean more towards this type of construction. You do get a little bit more, just kind of shock in the handle, but it's nothing that I found that's not manageable. It's still comfortable enough for me. So I really like the knife. Now moving on to the sheath, it's a decent sheath. It's not what I would term like an awesome sheath. An awesome sheath would be something like, again, like the sheath that comes with the SA6. I really love this sheath. As you can tell, it gives you points around here for lashing it to things, to molly gear, to your backpack. As you can tell, you can just loop some paracord through there to put it on your belt. They do sell, things like a pouch you can put on the front, or a system to put on your belt if you want to drop it down a little bit more. So this is very configurable. And even more, it's lightweight. It's very light, it's very minimalist, it doesn't take up a lot of space, and it's friction fit. It just locks in there. You don't have to worry about any buckles, snaps, or anything. So like a plastic sheath like this or a Kydex sheath is really my preferred. My second, kind of choice would be something more like this. And I do like these nylon sheaths. They're not quite as sweet as the molded sheaths, but these do work. They're definitely better than a leather option or something. because these will be weather resistant, waterproof, they'll dry quickly, they're fairly durable, fairly lightweight, and when they get wet, part of them drying out quickly is that they don't hold weight. If you get a leather sheath that gets wet, it's going to hold that moisture. It's just going to be heavy, and it's going to hold moisture on the blade. So I really am against leather if I can have a choice. So the blade does slide in there fairly easily. There is a plastic liner in there, so that is nice. It's not going to cut up the sheath too much. Now that liner doesn't really provide any friction, so it just slides in there nice and easy. I would prefer that maybe they had kind of bent that liner so that it provided some friction. I know people have pulled the liners out, just use a heat gun to bend it and you know, smush it down, put some friction on the blade, and then they just glue it back into this nylon sheath. That is an option if you're looking for a project. And part of the reason that being so loose in there is an issue is that, you know, if you don't get that snap on and you're walking around and this thing starts to fall out, because it can fairly easily, your reflex is going to be to just reach and try to catch that. You don't want to do that. You know, if you're, I don't know, 10 miles in the backcountry, this thing starts to fall out and you try to catch it and you cut your hand, you cut tendons in your hand, that's going to be a big issue for you. Your hands are critical to your survival. So you really want to be careful with this. You want to make sure that every time you put it in there, you snap it in and just secure the knife. So just be conscious of that. Now you do have a nice pouch here on the front, and I'm not huge on integrating gear into my knife. You know, some people build whole survival kits in these pouches. That's not really my style. If you want to do that, if that's something that you enjoy, go ahead, you know, if that's your system. So there is a pouch on here. It's not massive, but it's big enough to slide, you know, some basic stuff in there, maybe a sharpening stone or something. And I just keep that little Allen wrench in there. Now, as you'll notice, they do include a smaller knife with this. And so this is just kind of a bonus knife. This is, I believe, the BK13 Remora, and this also has a little plastic holster or a plastic sheath embedded in there. And this little Remora is a nice little knife. I'm not quite sure what the steel is on there. It's nothing impressive. You know, it's just a small little cheap knife. Again, you know, you could use this as maybe like a very small spear. You could just do some smaller whittling tasks with this. So it is a nice bonus. It's included. So I'm not going to complain about that. If you don't want the extra weight that this adds, which is probably only maybe an ounce or two, you could just, you know, leave this out if you prefer that. So just that just slips in there and it goes down. So that pouch does lay fairly flat if you don't have anything in there. Doesn't get in the way, doesn't add a lot of weight, so it doesn't really bug me too much. Now, as far as integration into, as far as carrying this, you do have just a basic belt loop on there, so you just thread your belt through. It's not quick detach or anything. I do prefer the quick detach systems, but this is nice and lightweight, simple, hard to mess it up. You do have just a little bit extra added feature on the back there, just some slots, so if you wanted to attach it using that, you could. And then on the bottom here, you have just two eyelets there, so if you wanted to lash this to your leg, just so, you know, if you're belt carrying this and you just don't want it flopping around, you could put a leg strap on there. So overall, it's a nice package, and price point wise, you know, prices fluctuate a little bit. Right now, as you know, I just checked as the making this video, it's going around 75 bucks. Which I think is very fair. It's a really good, durable knife. And one thing I forgot to mention, there was another change on the more modern one, is that you'll notice right here, they have stamped in their information. The newer one, they actually laser etch that in, and that's a big improvement to me. This stamping, in rare cases, can produce a little bit of stress fracturing in the blade, which means that under really hard use, the blade could crack and could break because of that stamping. The newer ones are laser etched in, much more like the U.S.A, like this. This is a laser etching. And so I really like that. That's a benefit and makes it even more reliable. And so if you're going into the backcountry, you're going into the wilderness, and you want something that's really reliable, that's a good, solid design, that will work for you, it's lightweight. This weighs only around 12 ounces, so it's not overly heavy. It's a decent thickness. It's just a good all-around survival knife that you can really count on. The BK7 is a great option. And so let's just look at some competitive options, some things to maybe also consider. Again, the SA6, this is a good knife. Just a little bit smaller as far as blade length, and honestly, when I started using the BK7, I really appreciated just that little extra length. I really do like the little bit extra that it gives you, and I've always found the SA6 just to be a tad bit short. It's good enough, I still like the knife, but I would just take a little bit extra if I can get it. So I do like that. This comes with the micarta, the better sheath. So, you know, while this is a little bit extra money, I think this is going maybe more around 110, 120. You do have some of those upgrades. Now, one of the benefits of the BK7 is it is a very common knife. So if you want to get micarta handles, I think I mentioned you can get those around 40 bucks. If you want to get a custom Kydex sheath, those are very available. You can just, there's a number of people that will make those for you. So if you want to upgrade this in the future, you can definitely do that and make it much more on par with something like the SA6. Now, another option that I would check out if you're, you know, maybe more on a budget, and you know, there's always more gear to check out. There's always more gear to add to the kit. So if you're wanting to save money, I would check out the Cold Steel Bushman. The Bushman is a very similar size. Now, the blade thickness is not nearly as thick on the Bushman. As you'll notice, the Bushman's much thinner. But I found that the Bushman can still baton, can still split. It's a little bit lighter weight. It's much more cost effective. I think the Bushman's around 25 bucks. The sheath's not quite as good, but it is nylon, so it's still going to be waterproof. And I don't have any major issues with the sheath. Check out my review on this if you want the full explanation on the Bushman. But it's very reliable, and for around 25 bucks, it's definitely a good option if you're more on a budget. If you want just a little bit larger knife, again, maybe the BK9, also check out the Ka-Bar Large Heavy Bowie. Now, it's not that slab construction like I talked about, but I've really heavily tested the Large Heavy Bowie. It's a very durable knife. It's a larger blade, and the bigger the better, in my opinion, when it comes to these survival knives. If you're splitting logs, that little bit larger blade is definitely going to help you out, and this is going to be more cost effective. This is around 55 bucks, I believe. So, some good competitive options out there. I'm sure there's stuff I've missed. To be perfectly honest, I'm not dialed into all the fixed blades that are out there right now, but I can definitely tell you I love the BK7. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to leave that in the comments. I'd be happy to help you guys out, happy to answer any of your questions. Everyone have a nice day. If you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. Feel free to like the video, and everyone have a nice day.